if some of you have been dealing with the talent identification issue, let me hopefully make you feel a little bit better. This is not a new problem. In fact, if you go back to at least the Industrial Revolution, typically skill, talent was defined by physical characteristics, depending on the labor that they were looking to accomplish. As our economy evolved, it changed from physical characteristics to intelligence, IQ tests. And after a couple of decades, people finally started thinking, wait a minute, people can be intelligent in multiple different ways, in multiple different aspects. There's plenty of ways to be smart. So then came what is often considered the third evolution in talent development, which is the competency model. And a lot of us probably operate off competency models in all of our organizations, and that certainly is a fantastic graduation from previous levels. If you are in the camp of Claudio Fernandez Arroz, I think that's how I say his last name, then you believe that we are likely in the beginning to early stages of the fourth evolution, especially when you look at some of the information that's in that Human Capital Trends report about the gig economy and the freelancing and people working on their own and leaving companies and all these other things. The fourth evolution is potential. And if we look at trying to identify potential to keep our organizations at the tip of the sword, no matter what our industry is, then we have to get a really good idea how do we identify those people and bring them on. And in Mr. Arroz's research, he identified the 4 core characteristics of high potential individuals. There's room to write it down on your handout, and like I said, I'm very happy to share the slide with you as well. I would like to touch on each of them real quick. And then once we touch on each of them, we're going to dive into some questions we can ask to try to identify this. Because as I stay with my 80s references, knowing is half the battle. I love you guys. 4 core components of potential. The first one is curiosity. Essentially, high potential people are far more likely to seek out new information, new alternatives, new choices, new experience on their own without somebody pushing them to do it. How many of you would love to have someone who actually tries to solve their own problems before they call you? Curiosity is a factor that will go a long way to establishing that. The next one is insight. All of you have probably heard the phrase, knowledge is power. At the expense of being a contrarian, that is not true. Knowledge is trivia. And unless you plan on going on Jeopardy in the near future, it may or may not do you any good. Power comes from having the ability to apply our knowledge successfully in the context of the situation we're currently operating in order to achieve the goals we've set for ourselves. And that's where insight comes in. Because essentially insight is taking the knowledge that we have developed from all areas of our life as we've grown up personally and professionally, hobby, sports, whatever it might be, and being able to apply that knowledge in the right situation to achieve our goals no matter the context. Next one's engagement. Engagement is very important because when we talk about connecting and persuading, we're talking about connecting and persuading with people both logically and emotionally. Too many times people try to persuade others with a purely rational approach. Here's the problem. Nobody has ever made a purely rational decision. I don't care how rational you think you are. Me too. We've never made a purely rational decision. There was an interesting research study done, I forget who did it or I would tell you, I can find it if you want access to it, where they looked at people who had severe injuries to their limbic system and had significant damage to their emotional thought process. They essentially are now required to make rational decisions. And you know what they couldn't do? Make a decision. Because life became an endless pro-con list. A lot of times, even when we feel like we're making a rational decision, there's an emotional kicker that sends us off the fence one way or the other. So if we can't connect with people rationally and emotionally, then we'll be able to persuade some people sometimes, but there'll be significant gaps where we will be unable to connect with them. The final might be the most obvious, which is determination. High potential people are more likely to fight their way through obstacles in order to achieve their goals. People without high potential are more likely to say, well, that sounded like a good idea, but this is a lot of work and I've got something else I could go do. So as we look at the 4 core components of potential, maybe some people come to mind right away. Maybe some people that you had previous conversations with and didn't invite to join your organization come to mind. We can know this, but if we can't apply this to what we do, if we can't find ways to identify this information in other people, then it's trivia and it's not really going to help us. If you turn to the second page of your handout, I believe it's on the back side, you have some places to write down some questions. We are a bit strapped for time, but I think we're okay. I have till 1:15, correct? Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we're a bit strapped for time, but we're okay. Let me ask you this. If you wanted to ask somebody a question to identify how curious they may be, what's a question you might ask them? Shout it out, I'll repeat it. Drew already needs shoes and to stretch his hamstring, so don't worry about that. Just shout it out, I'll repeat it.
What's the last book you read?
What's the last book you read? I like that. Gives an idea of what they're trying to learn. What else? Do you play board games? I would switch that, if I may offer, to what was the last board game you played or what's your favorite board game. If we say do you, that's a yes or no question, so we'll just ask them what was the last one or what was your favorite one.
What kind of music do you listen to?
What kind of music do you listen to? I like that. Here is my personal favorite. If you've got a better one, by all means use it. Here's my personal, yes ma'am.
How would you like to approach a project or a situation?
Okay, how would you like to approach a project or a situation? May I offer one small tweak?
Yep.
What is the most creative approach you've ever taken to a project or a situation? So now we're actually diving into their thought process. Is that helpful? Okay. Here's my favorite. When was the last time you chose to start a project that you weren't completely confident you could finish successfully? Notice in this question there's no reference to personal or work life because I don't care. I want to see if they're curious. I don't care if they demonstrate that curiosity from work or personal life. That means nothing to me. It's the curiosity that I care about. So we don't limit it. Please don't ask somebody a question that starts with tell me about a time. I know I just alienated 2/3 of the room. Come back to me, please. If you ask somebody a question that starts with tell me about a time, you are more likely to get a prepared response. You are more likely to inspire their creative process. Maybe you get a story that's true. Maybe you get a story that combines other people. Instead of asking tell me about a time, ask the same question. Just please start it, bless you, with when was the last time? When was the first time? What's the most significant time? Ask them about a very specific time. Once you ask them about a specific time, all of their nonverbal behavior now will change as they are thinking about their answer. And as they deliver their answer, all of their verbal and nonverbal communication is now in relation to a specific instance, which now gives us a much clearer read of their response. While I'm going off on this tangent, please stop asking compound questions. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Please tell me about a time where you had to deal with a supervisor who was upset with you. Walk me through why they were upset, the incident that occurred, how you handled it with them, how you felt about the result, and what the outcome was several months later. We just asked that person 8 questions. Which, by the way, sent their cognitive process into a tornado. They might answer 2 or 3. Not only have we sent them down the wrong road, but we also have now probably given ourselves a check-the-box mentality because we've asked such a convoluted question. When the answer sort of kind of fits more or less most of what we asked, we go, okay, and move down to the next question. One question at a time. Please walk me through the last time you had to deal with an escalated conflict with a superior. Done. Let them answer it. When they're done, now ask your follow-up questions. How did it start? How did you plan to handle it with them? What was the immediate effect? How did it affect your relationship after? Break it down into follow-up questions, one question at a time. I'm done. After that, we have insight, correct? What's a question that you think you might like to ask somebody to see what their skills might be to apply information successfully no matter where that information comes from? Bueller. Yes, ma'am.
What was your last eureka moment?
What was your last eureka moment? I like that. May I offer one small tweak?
Yes.
Please walk me through your last eureka moment. When somebody tells a story that is true, that story should have 3 components to it: a pre-event, event, and post-event. And all 3 components to that story should be roughly the same length and have roughly the same amount of detail. If we say, what was your last eureka event? They'll give it to you. It's not a bad question. If we say, please walk me through your last Eureka event, now we give ourselves a more likely opportunity to get all three pieces of the story that we can evaluate for truthfulness, for applicability, for detail, for potential follow-up questions. Does that help? Thank you. Who's got another one? Yes, ma'am.
Walk me through a time something didn't go the way you planned, and what would you do different?
I love that. May I offer a couple small tweaks? If you didn't hear it, it was walk me through a time where something didn't go to plan and how did you handle it? Did I get?
What would you do different?
I'm sorry, what would you do different? And I teach listening. Couple small tweaks. First one would be walk me through the last time, or walk me through the most significant time. Something didn't go to plan. Please just stop there. Then let them answer. Then when they're done, thank you very much. I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. Now with that experience in your back pocket, if you were in a similar situation, what have you learned and how would you approach it differently? Is that fair? Thank you. All right, here's one of my favorites. Again, if you like it, steal it and take credit for it. If you don't, ignore it. Neither one of us are any worse off. When was the last time you used the lesson you learned outside of work to resolve an issue inside of work? Sports, church, fishing, mission trips, bless you, working on cars. I don't care, kids. My wife and I have a 14-month-old son. I'm learning something new every hour. Next one was engagement. What do you guys think for engagement? And what's a question you could ask somebody to see how they might be able to connect and persuade someone rationally and emotionally? I know I'm asking you to think after lunch. This is cruel and unusual punishment. I'm sorry?
What really gets you up in the morning?
Okay, what gets you up in the morning? Usually my son crying. What else? Go. I like that a lot. Tell me about the last time you changed someone's mind. May I offer a small tweak? Please walk me through the hardest you ever had to work to persuade someone to commit to your recommended alternative. Now, the tweak in here that I really like is the hardest you've ever had to work. Because when we're under pressure, we tend to go to what we know. Our brain shuts off, we experience stress, we stop thinking, we go to what we're comfortable with. So if I say what's the hardest you've ever had to work, that's going to be their go-to persuasive approach. I'm going to let them explain it. Whether that one is rational or emotional, when they're done, I'm going to come back and ask them the opposite. So my next question, if you gave me a very rational answer, my next question would be, thank you very much, I appreciate you helping me understand that. I'd like to flip the coin and ask you this. Considering that was a very rational approach, what was the hardest you ever had to work to persuade somebody emotionally? And see if I get a different answer or not. So I break that one down into two. But that would break PowerPoint etiquette rules, so there's only one. How about determination? What's a question you could ask somebody to try to determine how determined they are? There's a better way to say that. To try to identify how determined they are. Kick save. Anybody? At this point, you're like, come on, Mike, that's the last one. Just give it to us. Okay, I heard yes. That's what I'll do. This one's the most direct. What's the largest set of obstacles you've ever had to overcome? Once again, is there any reference to personal or professional life? No. I don't care. I want to know how dedicated they are, how hard they're willing to work, especially when they have a goal, something they want to achieve. And notice we didn't say obstacles, we said set of obstacles. I want to set this up. Overcoming one obstacle and the series of obstacles are two entirely different things. I want the series. Those aren't the only questions I have. Those are my favorite. If you're interested in any others or want to knock around a few ideas, my email address is on the bottom of that handout, and I'd be more than happy to knock through this with you. I'm a geek for this stuff. This is kind of what gets me out of bed in the morning, which I know is a little bit shameful, but it's true.